Alright, so I just passed the CompTIA Linux Plus exam, and in this video, I want to break down exactly how I did it. So I'll be covering my background with Linux going into this exam, the resources that I used, how I studied, what the exam was actually like, what I would do differently if I had to start it all over, and if I think the Linux Plus is even worth it or not. So as for my background with Linux prior to taking and passing the CompTIA Linux Plus certification, I would say, just a foundational background of what Linux was. So I understood the file system hierarchy. I understood it's like the simple commands, how to navigate the terminal, what the kernel was, things like that. But when it comes into applying it on a larger scale, I wasn't as advanced. I would say that I had enough of a foundation that if I spent about roughly a month of dedicated self-study, that the Linux Plus was doable. But that's also an important detail that I do want to stress. If you are brand new to Linux, I would not recommend starting with the Linux Plus. Build up a strong foundation first and then certify after you fully understand what you're certifying in. You should be comfortable enough to talk about the material, to be able to explain some of the deeper and more complex topics on the exam. It shouldn't all be new to you. So in my case, I already had that baseline kind of built up. I've been kind of tinkering around with Linux, working on little scripts, doing labs. So I felt comfortable enough to take that exam in the time frame that I did. So now let's talk about the Linux Plus exam itself. So the retail price of the CompTIA Linux Plus exam is about $390. Now I only paid about $190, and the way that I did that was by leveraging the CompTIA academic store. So if you're a student, if you have a student Gmail, I would definitely recommend getting that student discount because, I mean, you save money, and in this economy, why not? But if you're also not in school, perhaps you're already working and you're in tech, I would ask your manager or ask perhaps even HR and see if they would also sponsor you for getting the Linux Plus exam. If it relates to some of the roles and some of the work that you're doing at your job already, your job may just sponsor you to get it. So utilize all the avenues that you possibly can. So now let's talk about the actual exam format. So usually on CompTIA exams, including the Linux Plus, you're getting about a maximum of 90 questions. Most of those, obviously, yes, are multiple choice, and you do have the pesky PBQs, as I would like to call them, the performance-based questions. Definitely watch out for those. So when I took my exam, I had 3 PBQs and 62 multiple choice questions. So I had a total of 65 questions on my exam. I was a little bit worried when I seen that because obviously then in that case, every single question is weighed just slightly more, but it was just something to kind of pay attention to. So yes, when you take the exam, you get about 90 minutes to complete the exam. That is standard, it doesn't vary. So definitely I hit the PBQs first. Some people tell you to do the questions first, come back to the PBQs. Some people say do the PBQs first, flag everything else you don't know. It's completely up to you. You take the test however you feel comfortable doing so. So I scored about an 800. So personally, I feel like I passed pretty comfortably. There was definitely obviously some stuff that I didn't know how to answer fully. They hit you with some questions that if you're not careful and you're not looking and you don't understand the syntax and the semantics, you can definitely get tripped up. But I think I did pretty well. But I'm always nervous when I take these exams. So I was submitting, I was praying, I was like, man, whew, hopefully. But we passed, all glory be to God, and we're ready to keep going. Wait. If you are enjoying this video, if I'm dropping some gems, things that are helping you guys to pass this exam, please consider subscribing to the channel. It does definitely help a lot. All right, now back to the video. So let's talk about how I studied to pass this exam. So I spent a lot of time focusing on labs and actually working with the commands versus trying to just memorize them. I spent a lot of time analyzing each command. How does the syntax of this command work? Why is this option being used here and not at the end? How does the semantics all fit together to understand exactly what the command is doing? That way, when I saw the command on the exam, I can easily say, that's not what it does, this is what it does, and you just have a better understanding of how everything strings together. I think the main benefit of taking an approach like that, really trying to work with the commands, understanding each option, understanding the syntax and semantics of the commands, it helps you on a very deep level Linux, there's such a profundity to Linux as a concept itself. Honestly, the CompTIA Linux Plus is an entry-level certification, but with that being said, they could have hit me in any way they thought was necessary. Like the way they asked the questions, they could have got very much more in depth, deep with it. And so with that, I would say definitely take time to understand, not just memorize. So me personally, I like to take notes the old school way. I had about 2 notebooks. There's about 50 or 60 pages in each of these. So I filled these up with notes, going back and revising and just understanding as well as I can the thought process behind the concepts, understanding how everything works. I dropped a video on how I plan to study to pass this exam within a month time frame, and I showed how I leverage different tools such as ChatGPT. I have the book right here. Also going online and checking out the official CompTIA Linux Plus objectives for the current exam version. So even taking a look on how I work through the Linux Plus objectives, I basically went through and I had ChatGPT explain a lot of the concepts that I didn't understand. And with that, I would also leverage AI just to basically go through and break it all apart. So I'm talking about break down the flags, help me understand what the flags mean, break down the commands, help me understand how everything fits together, just so I could have a deeper understanding of what I was looking at. So taking notes on like pen and paper, it's definitely a grind, but it forces you to kind of focus. I'm pretty sure there's a science behind actually writing down the material that you want to remember. I don't know, I read that somewhere, but basically, I would say definitely do leverage any of the resources that you can. I always stress knowing your acronyms. However, on this exam, I don't know, there wasn't that many new acronyms for me to work with, so I opted out of using flashcards this time around. However, I do say that the acronyms that did show up when I was studying for the Security Plus, that did show up when I was studying for the Network Plus, and just studying those 2 concepts as a whole, that definitely did show up on the exam. So if you don't have a good foundation in networking and you don't have a good foundation in security, I would say hold off on the Linux Plus exam for now. Build up your understanding in those, especially in hardware as well. Build up your understanding in those, and then you can progress to taking something like the Linux Plus exam. So another thing that I also very much heavily utilized was practice tests. I would have ChatGPT give me, based off of the information presented in the objective list posted by CompTIA, I would go to ChatGPT and say, okay, now break down and give me 30 CompTIA style questions based off of this one section. And I would run through that maybe 3, 4, 5 times and just get as many questions through as I can. Also, it helps with timing. It's just like a sprint. Just try to understand, see if you could break down the question as fast as possible, look through the answers, use deductive reasoning, and see how many you get right. So I ran through that many times, and it definitely does help just to get used to some of the questions that can be thrown at you. That's also a very good way of filling in gaps in your own knowledge, because there's some times when I had a question that I studied, but in the way that it was asked, I didn't know. And so that led me to go back and to revisit my whole entire thought process as a whole, and just to make sure I really did understand it the way that I need to. So when I miss a question, I don't just mark it wrong. I flag it and I go back. I fully break apart what exactly is the question asking me and what exactly is each option, each answer choice telling me. And based off of that, a lot of times when you break it down on this very simple level, the answer is just right there for you. But you have to go back and dissect it. You have to go back and break it apart and make it easy for you to understand. But once you do that though, you can take that insight and you can apply that moving forward. So an underrated strategy that I would recommend if you're studying for the CompTIA Linux Plus or any exam in general, I always recommend going deeper than what the exam actually requires. So I actually utilized this principle when I was studying for my Network Plus. My mentor gave me a lot of information and material on the CCNA certification exam. And the CCNA is, I would say it's about more intermediate than the Network Plus, which I would argue is entry level. But just going deeper into the topics on the CCNA exam, it made understanding what the Network Plus was all about so much easier. So if you're studying for the Linux Plus and you want to take the Linux Plus, I would probably recommend going for the LPIC or going for the Red Hat Certified Systems Administrator exam. They get just a little bit deeper from my knowledge. However, I would also also say that some of those exams are proprietary exams to certain distributions, and the Linux Plus is just a little bit more general. So that's just something to also keep in mind, but use it if you will. My whole entire mentality is just that if you push yourself harder during the prep, the actual exam won't feel as overwhelming. So what I would do differently if I had to take this exam again, I again would focus more on the syntax. Syntax is oftentimes where they're gonna get you. Syntax and semantics. And I stress that so much if you're gonna look to take this exam right here. Sometimes it's not just what the command is doing, it's what options and where. So they can swap certain things around and the whole entire command doesn't even make any sense. So you have to understand, where does this flag fit into this particular command? How should this command be applied in this context? You need to understand all of that. And when it comes down to Linux, there is so many commands. Everything is commands in Linux, so you got to know it. Definitely take your time. Don't sweat it if you don't get it the first time around. Keep exposing yourself as many times as you can. That was one of the hacks that I did. I tried to interface with the material as much as I can. I'm talking, I would spend hours a day studying, obviously, but as many sessions as possible I could fit into a day. That always does help. Experience and interface with the material as much as you can. So another thing that I would also spend more time on if I wanted to take and pass this again, I would spend more time on backup and recovery concepts. That actually did come up a lot more than I anticipated on the exam, but it's in the objectives. So anything that you see in the objectives, just assume that it's fair game. And third, the thing that I would also spend a lot more time on is containerization. Containers are becoming a huge part of Linux. So I would definitely stress to learn Docker, learn how it integrates and works with Linux systems, understand the commands and concepts. Take your time with that, definitely. So how does the Linux Plus fit in with other certifications? Again, as I said before, I would stress, especially if you're entry level, if you're just getting started in cybersecurity, I would urge you to start first with the Network Plus and Security Plus. If you're talking about cybersecurity, which is defending your cyber interface, defending your cyber network, you have to understand the network, which is Network Plus, and you have to understand how to defend it, which is Security Plus. Then you can get more into the weeds as to different operating systems such as Linux and Windows and just understand more about how that works. I would definitely urge you to learn Linux, but I just feel personally that there's an order of operations that you should progress into, and I would definitely not say start with Linux. Linux can definitely feel daunting if you don't have a solid foundation in it and if you don't understand how it fits into the broader implications of cybersecurity and IT as a whole. So for me personally, I did the Security Plus first and then the Network Plus, and then the Linux Plus here is now my third certification. A lot of people tell you to do the Network Plus and then the Security Plus. In my opinion, the order doesn't really matter. What matters to me is that both of these as a prerequisite gives you a solid foundation for which you can then tackle the Linux Plus. And the reason why I say to focus on these two certifications first is because the Linux Plus takes the concepts from networking and security and it applies it to a Linux environment. So if you already understand networking protocols and security best concepts, you will recognize these when they do pop up on the exam. You'll recognize them when they're presented to you, and it just gives you so much more of an advantage. So for my top tips for passing the Linux Plus exam, I would say big always trumps small. And what I mean by that, don't just study as if you're just trying to pass the Linux Plus. Get deep with it, really chew on that material. Study as if you're really trying to pass an exam even harder than the Linux Plus. Study, go a little bit beyond, because the higher you go, you have a better vantage point to understanding the material. So definitely do that. That gives you a lot more leverage when you're taking these exams, and it just helps you overall because you don't just want the certification. The goal at the end of the day should be to actually understand the material. Number two, I would recommend doing labs. Again, studying for the Linux Plus is very different than actually learning Linux. And the reason why I say that is because the Linux Plus, again, is multiple choice. When you get into the real world and you're actually working with Linux, it's not multiple choice. Focus on actually understanding how to use and apply these commands. That helps so much more. I personally went and installed a Kali virtual machine on my computer right here, and I would just run through as many labs as I can. So I would have ChatGPT give me a lab based off of this domain that I just finished taking notes on. And I would do a lab or two and just run through it and understand how to use the concepts. And that helps you so much more versus just reading about what the commands do, understanding how and when to use certain commands. And of course, number 3, I gotta warn you guys again, and I'm always gonna warn you guys, watch out for those PBQs, the pesky PBQs. They can eat up your time if you're not ready. Instead of spending 15 minutes trying to understand the simulation and trying to understand exactly everything, obviously make sure you're solid in the rest of the exam and then spend some time with the PBQs. They can hit you in any way. You gotta be prepared for anything. And that's why I recommend doing labs. Your labs are gonna mimic the PBQs best. So now the big question, is the Linux Plus exam worth it? The honest answer, it depends. If you're getting into system administration or IT generalist roles or cybersecurity roles, I would definitely say take the Linux Plus exam. It's a general Linux exam and it proves that you're comfortable working with Linux concepts. Now, notice what I said there. I didn't say you're comfortable working with Linux per se, but working and understanding Linux concepts. The exam, and honestly, a lot of CompTIA exams as a whole are concept based. They don't actually put you into a Linux environment and see that you know how to manage these things yourself. So if you're really trying to get into Linux and you want to show, hey, I do really know Linux, you might also want to consider some alternative exams such as the LPIC 1 or Red Hat's Certified Systems Administrator exam. Those also do take a deep dive into Linux, and they're also very respected certifications. So you can also take a look at that. But my honest take is that no matter what certification you're looking at, Linux knowledge is always worth it. Linux runs servers, cloud infrastructures, it's everywhere in cybersecurity. Now, this certification is just validation, but it's the skills that you actually gain over time is what's gonna pay off. So to wrap it all up, I passed the CompTIA Linux Plus exam with about roughly 1 month of study. I scored about an 800 out of 900, which I think equates to about an 88 or so %. If you wanted to take this exam and pass it, I would recommend you focus on labs, syntax, and not underestimating backups and containers. If you're studying for the Linux Plus exam, drop a comment. I would love to see what resources you guys are using, also how you guys are studying, what topics are giving you some trouble. I'll continue to be making videos on my certification journey, my cybersecurity journey as a whole. So if that helps you, please subscribe, comment, and stay tuned. Take care, guys. I'm here outside the testing center. I'm about to go take my Linux Plus exam. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm just a little bit nervous. I'm always nervous before I take these exams, but we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna perform. I studied. I mean, you see these eye bags in my face. That means, that just means I'm locked in. So I'm gonna let you guys know how it goes. Obviously, I'm gonna give you guys the breakdown. I'm gonna give you guys the rundown how it is. But here we are. So it is what it is.